This
So,
conference will
participants,
now
thank
be
you for your
recorded.
kind cooperation and joining
Krishnagiri,
us for our second session. A very warm good morning. Okay. A very warm good morning and welcome back to the International Conference on Economics of Love and Happiness and Welfare, organized by Department of Economics, St. Joseph College Autonomous Irinjalakuda and Sacred Heart College Chalakudi, Kerala, India. Tolstoy asserted that one can live magnificently in this world if one knows how to work and how to love. Freud said that love and work and love, that's all there is. So, love and work. Tolstoy and Freud suggested that we need to do both. But how can love be asserted as an organizational norm? So today, to welcome all our gathering, I invite the chair of the session, Dr. Chako Jospi, head of department and associate professor at Sacred Heart College, Chalakudi. Over to you, sir.
thank you, Krishnagiri. Good morning to all the participants. I would like to welcome all of you in just one word to this technical session. We will straight away go to the business. So it will be my pleasure to introduce the resource person of this day. Vanji M. Bugatti is the resource person for this day. And I would like to tell you how I happened to get associated with her, who is actually not an academician. I was, as you know, there is a movie called In Pursuit of Happiness. So once this theme for the conference was fixed, I was in pursuit of topics or speakers who can speak on this topic. So I happened to find a master's thesis in the website of Pepperdine University of California, and that thesis was titled as Love as an Organizational Norm, an Exploration at Value-Centered Organization. So I went through that master's thesis, which was written as part of a Master of Science degree in organizational development, and I found it very interesting. The writer of the thesis, that is our resource person of the day, Vanji, was arguing that based on her finding, she was arguing that most of the participants in her case studies argued that it's a part of human essence and whole selves that love is a norm and it should be beneficial to employees and organizations. So she concludes in her master's thesis, based on her evidences, that love could become an organizational norm. That was, in fact, a surprise to me, because when we teach economics, we say that profit maximization is the organizational goal, or at the best, it could be sales maximization, but you never argue that love is an organizational norm. So I sent an email to Vanji Bugatti asking her whether you could speak in a conference being organized by us on the topic economics of happiness and welfare. And she readily agreed, and we had many conversations to clarify the concepts and topics, and finally she's here today to deliver her lecture. I'll give you a brief introduction on Ms. Vanji Bugatti. Vanji M. Bugatti is a dynamic, inclusive, and engaging consultant with a background in organization development, organizational effectiveness, and human resources. She is skilled in management development, diversity and inclusion, intercultural relations and communications, cultural diversity, emotional intelligence, and appreciative inquiry. Vanji is a catalyst for transformation and believes that sustainable change is possible by including all the voices in the room, and creating an environment where curiosity, compassion, respect, understanding, and love, yes, love drives meaningful conversations. Her lifelong curiosity for the people of the world and its different cultures made her an avid traveler who loves to immerse herself in local customs, languages, and values. She is enthusiastic about finding the commonalities among people while celebrating the differences that make each culture a unique treasure to be admired and savored. Vanji has facilitated organizational development initiatives in Puerto Rico in the United States, France, Costa Rica, and South Africa. These multicultural opportunities have provided a platform to combine her skills for facilitating change with her ability to understand, appreciate, and respect other cultures. Vanji is also is certified as an emotional intelligence and diversity facilitator. Ms. Bugatti currently lives in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where she leads her consulting firm, Imagine. So, this is a brief of our today's presenter, Vanji M. Bugatti. And without taking much of your time, I would like to welcome Ms. Vanji M. Bugatti to this technical session. And I also welcome all the participants to be actively participating in this session. Over to you, Vanji.
Well, first of all, good morning to all of you. Thank you so much, Chaco, for your introduction and for honestly for inviting me to be part of this wonderful session and conference. I am very thrilled and very honored to be here to be sharing my life passion. So I really appreciate the opportunity and the space that you're providing for this. I was going to give a little bit of a background of me, but you went ahead, so maybe I don't have to go into that. But before I begin discussing my thesis, right, and my research, I would like everybody to maybe close your eyes if you would like to, but I want you to get into a place where you can imagine. And I invite you to imagine a workplace where everybody understands that even if they disagree, they will have each other's back. Or an environment where decisions are made keeping in mind all the stakeholders, even the community in which the organization is. Or a workplace where change is embraced with hope and conflict is handled with kindness. Or an organization where coworkers can trust each other and their leaders. A place where people feel seen, respected, validated, free, and encouraged to act in kind ways. That for me is the dream place, and it's the place I work very hard every day to create with any client that I work with. I hope that place is inspiring for all of you, and that going through the journey of my thesis, right, walking with me on the journey of my thesis will serve as an inspiration for you as well. This idea of a workplace is what I envisioned for my research. So that's why I believe love is the foundation for such an environment. Before I start discussing my research, I would like to provide a little bit of context of why love it's so important for me and why I wanted to bring it to organizations and be something that we can actually talk about. As Dr. Chaco Jose mentioned, I started my career in human resources, and after a while, I realized this felt too transactional for me. I wasn't sure I had chosen the right career, so I decided, it was a time in my life when I was about to start a family. So my husband and I decided that I would quit my job and I would stay home and raise my children. So I decided to take a break from my professional development in order to have a really active participation in my children's development. During that time, like Dr. Jose mentioned, during that, I am an avid traveler. I love cultures. I love finding the differences in cultures and the similarities. I love sitting down and talking to people, understanding why they do the things they do. And I believe that's where we find humanity. So during that time, I decided, let me learn some other things. And that's when I started learning about intercultural relations. I got certified. I got certified in emotional intelligence and diversity and inclusion. And I even became a facilitator. I'm a certified facilitator for that. What it was during that time when I was exposed to organization development. And it was actually one of my professors of emotional intelligence mentioned the field to me, and at that moment I realized this is where I want to go. So what is organization development? There are many definitions by different scholars, but I would like to explain it this way. It's a way in which we bring humanity into organizations. It's a way to look at the entire organization and see how everything connects, how each area of the organization can support the other, and from maybe a business perspective, to look at the strategy that the organization has in mind, right? The strategy they want to pursue, and align all the different areas within the organization to support that strategy. So it's constantly looking at what we need to improve in order to support the strategy. And that includes people. That includes developing our people, taking care of our people so they feel engaged in the work environment and they feel engaged in the organization as well. So when I learned what organization development was, I was like, I can use my other skills because they really are associated one way or another with this field. And I saw also an opportunity to go into a field in which I could impact and hopefully change the business world, the workplace, and any organization. At that moment, I also realized that I could channel love as the driving force to empower others to foster change on their own. I chose to believe that a world full of compassion, respect, curiosity, trust, understanding, and love is possible and sustainable. So I started my journey to bring love into the organizations. When I started my master's degree, I have to be honest that I was faced with choosing a subject for my thesis, and I was a little nervous because nothing was really interesting me. And one of my professors said in one of our classes, you can choose something practical for your thesis, you can choose something related to your job, or you can simply choose something that you're passionate about. And at that moment, I finally had the courage to choose love as the subject for my thesis. After all, that was the reason I had joined my master's degree program and the reason why I wanted to become an organization development practitioner. I was apprehensive doing my research because when I started sharing with other peers my subject, I faced resistance and negative reactions. I was told that love is a soft skill and that no organization will find it valuable. They recommended me to change this subject to a more practical one because they knew I was starting a consulting firm and they thought that maybe this would negatively impact me getting into my business and supporting new clients. But I realized, what? This is what I got into the field. This is what I want to do. Therefore, I'm going to be honest and I'm going to be true to myself and explore if love can really belong in organizations and go a little bit more further, right? If love can be sustainable in an organization? What are the benefits for the organization and for the people? So here I am about to share with you my academic research. And like Dr. Chaco Jose mentioned, I am not an academic, right? I am a consulting, an organization development consultant. But this subject, this research is my passion. And therefore it happens to also be extremely personal. And it is my choice. It's how I choose to live my life, although it's not always easy, but it's possible. It's how I choose to live my life and how I want to go through the journey of my life. So before we go discussing my research, I would like to know if anybody has any questions. At this point, I will be sharing my screen, but feel free to interrupt if you have any question. If not, we can leave all the questions till the end of my presentation, and I'll be more than happy to answer the questions for you.
Vanji, we have asked the participants to type in questions if they have it in the chat box. So Krishna Giri will be picking up the questions for you.
Perfect.
So she will let you know if there are questions. You can proceed with your presentation.
Perfect. Thank you. I think it's better, right? I think it's sometimes difficult while I'm presenting my screen to actually see the chat. So I'll really appreciate keeping track of the questions. Thank you. So I will be sharing. So can everybody see?
Yeah, we can see. We
the
can
screen?
see.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So here it is, love as an organizational norm. It's an exploration at a values-centered organization. So you might be, I already gave you a little bit of an idea of why, but why did I choose these? And two quotes are very important in my research, and they stayed with me, right? They were constantly like little voices in the back of my head reminding me of why I wanted to do this research. And the first one is this one by Dr. Leo Buscaglia, and he said, don't spend your precious time asking why isn't the world a better place. It will only be time wasted. The question to ask instead is, how can I make it better? And to that, there is an answer. And as you can imagine, for me, that answer is love. There's another quote that I would love to share with you, because with this one, it became another driver for my research. And this one is by Dr. Martin Luther King, and he said, power without love is reckless and abusive, or worse. And love without power is sentimental and anemic, or worse. We can see both of these degenerative forms in ourselves. Choosing either power or love is always a mistake. How can then we exercise power and love together? Both, like I mentioned, both quotes were a constant reminder during my research. And this one in particularly challenged me because I thought that maybe throughout my research I could find an answer. So love is universal. It is the strongest force in the universe. Okay, is the strongest force in the universe, and since the beginning of time, love has colored human existence. It has inspired many of humanity in creating masterpieces. It is the source of one's greatest joys and deepest sorrows. Love has moved people to take significant risks in the name of country, family, faith, and their dreams. It is what makes anything that one does worthwhile. But despite love being universal, it remains largely unexamined within organizational settings. So I decided to approach my research calling love the elephant in the room. Um, while I started doing my research, some of the literature that I was faced with, I read some literature by Harrison, and he mentioned that to love is to be human. And as human beings, we have an innate need to love and be loved. The need to express love is fundamental in humans, and humans have that innate need to love. I also realized, or I also started um, reading more about it, is love is accepted in our personal lives, but it's still a taboo in the workplace. So we can talk about love with our friends, with our families, but in the workplace, it's not considered maybe appropriate. And maybe because it's associated with different types of relationships. But the love that we're talking about here is the love for humanity. Um, and if any organization chooses to talk about love, they don't call it love. They talk about kindness, they talk about caring. So for me, the question was why they don't call love for what it is. That's why I decided to call love the elephant in the room, right? It's always present, but it's not acknowledged. So what is love? Defining love as a universal concept is difficult because of the subjectivity of the matter. Despite the fact that throughout history, humanity has been captivated in understanding what love is and how it manifests in our daily lives. Love is present and discussed in religious scriptures and in philosophical, classical, and modern literature. Therefore, there are many sources that attempt to define love, even though it is an intangible concept influenced by cultural and individual perceptions. The construct of love has various definitions and interpretations given that it is subjective. Yet, it is a universal quality. So, for example, the ancient Greeks had different names for love. They call it philia, which is the fraternal love, eros, the passionate love, ludus, playful love, pragma, long-standing love, philautia, the love of the self, and finally agape, a divine love for everyone. Sophocles is known to have said that one word frees us from all weight and pain in the world, and that word is love. In Hinduism, love is depicted in the Bhagavad Gita as bhakti yoga, the path of devotion and love, where help is proffered and spirits are healed. Ahava is the Hebrew word for love. For Jews, ahava is an emotion that involves action. It's a way of life closely related to acts of generosity and kindness. Buddha established 4 behaviors or virtues to describe true love. These are maitri, or kindness, karuna, or compassion, mudita, or joy, happiness, and upeshka, freedom. In Islam, a believer who loves God is expected to love God's people and be kind to them. The Quran tells us that, the Quran tells us the following regarding human love for fellow humans. They give food and love for him to the poor and the orphan and the captive. They say, we only feed you for God's sake. We desire from you neither reward nor thanks. And finally, in Christianity, Jesus said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. And this is the first and greatest commandment. The second commandment is, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law of the prophets. St. Peter, in his letters to the early Corinthians, similarly invited them to live in love. He said, live in harmony with one another, be sympathetic, love as brothers, be compassionate and humble, do not repay evil with evil, or insult with insult, but with blessing, because to this you are called, so that you may inherit a blessing. All these religions and cultures, and the cultures they inspire, coincide in the way love exists among humans. They all depict a fraternal love, where caring for one another is of the utmost importance. Love is an emotion that manifests in behaviors representing kindness, respect, compassion, humility, generosity, joy, harmony, and freedom. Love becomes a way of everyday life. But for the purpose of my study, I had to define love. I needed to create a frame of reference so that participants could answer the questions in my interviews. The definition that I came up with was provided in an orientation meeting to present the research to the potential subjects, and also it was reminded to them during the interviews. So the definition that was used for the purpose of the research is, love is altruistic behaviors that enrich people's daily interactions and relationships with kindness, respect, clear and honest communication, authenticity, inclusion, acceptance, validation, hope, teamwork, excellence, joy, and freedom. Love is actually feeling felt. Oops, sorry. So, while doing my research, my literature research, I read a book by Dr. Leo Buscaglia called Love. And in this book, he stated that love is a learned phenomenon. And he believed that his mission in life was to persuade others to act upon love. So I saw my study as an opportunity to inspire and encourage organizations, its leaders, and its employees to find ways in which they could choose, act, and feel love. Concepts like organization, norms, values, the whole self emerged while doing my research. Values, for the purpose of the study, was defined as standards of what a group holds as desirable and good, and what they strive to create or become. It is the highest aspiration of what a group attempts to become or create. Norms are the behavioral manifestations, implicit or explicit, of the organizational culture created by the group values and beliefs. Informal rules that groups adopt to regulate their group members' behavior. And organizations. Cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead believed that society affects the individual, and therefore the individual helps in the formation of society and its culture. This perspective was analyzed in a research by Hossain and Ali, who concluded that society and the individual go hand in hand, and both are interdependent. The literature also highlighted that an organization can be considered as a society, as supported in the research by Dr. Perez Lopez, where he elaborated. An organization is a group of people who coordinate their actions to serve a common purpose, aimed at achieving certain results that they all consider desirable, albeit for different reasons, and that they can achieve only, or at least more effectively, through joint action, with some prospect of continued joint action in the longer term. Similar to the human need and desire to live in a society, the development of norms to thrive and survive in organization is equally important. So we can really see that an organization it's a representation of society. Another concept that emerged is the whole self. And really, it became the link between love, norms, and organizations, because the individual is that whole self. He or she is the one who feels love, who belongs to the group, who enacts the appropriate behaviors expected to be part of that organization. It's someone who can mindfully choose to love and to have love become the norm that drives any exchange, interaction, and intervention in that organization. Bringing the whole self to work requires being vulnerable, humble, and authentic. Showing up in an organization as one whole self is a significant risk. So after reviewing the literature for my research, I asked myself, since norms are the embodiment of values, and love is a value, is it probable that love could become a norm as well? Although no literature was found to explicitly address how to transform love, the value, into love, the norm, researchers have addressed the impact of norms and love in organizations. Based on this body of literature, I have hypothesized that having love as an organizational norm creates an environment where people can have difficult conversations and discuss their feelings and concerns with coworkers. In organizational environments characterized by love, employees feel that they are heard and seen as a whole person. Literature by Dr. Argandoña emphasized that love for others, is present one way or another in all facets of people's lives, including economic organizations. Thus, it may be concluded that literature validates the desire and need to create awareness on how love impacts and manifests in organizational life. In doing so, my study aimed to fill a gap in management literature by examining whether a norm of love could be accepted, incorporated, sustained, and beneficial to an organization. So the purpose of my research, which was a case study, is an exploratory qualitative study that investigated to what extent, if any, developing a norm of love might be accepted, incorporated, sustained, and beneficial to an organization. The research examined 4 questions. Can love be part of an organization's culture? How does it manifest in a work environment? What benefits it provides to the company and to the employees? And how can this norm be implemented and sustained? So the setting for my research was a 24-year-old telecommunications company privately owned in Puerto Rico. The targeted subjects were the organization's directors, managers, and supervisors, which were 28. Out of these 28, they were all invited to an orientation briefing. Only 24 participated, and out of those 24, 18 actually became participants in the research. And as I mentioned earlier, the definition of love for the purpose of the study was presented in this orientation, and again reminded while I was doing the interviews. So my results. The journey, and before I go deep down into the results of the research, I wanted to express that the journey to complete my study reinforced the universal power of love within me. It validated my desire to advocate for love in all human interactions, be an agent of change, courageous to talk about love, the elephant in the room that I mentioned earlier, and be an organization development practitioner ready to serve the world with love. So, going into more background, what were the results of my thesis? Well, first of all, 80, is there a question?
I don't think so. Somebody switched on mic by accident.
Oh,
You can continue.
no problem. 82% of the participants, which is the majority of the participants, acknowledge that love is a part of the human essence and the whole selves, and that such norm would be beneficial to employees and to the organization. What were the research categories that emerged during my study? Acceptance, implementation, and whole self. So in reality, people were very concerned, the participants were very concerned about how the norm could be accepted and if it could be accepted, how to implement a norm and make it sustainable, and really including the whole self in that process, because it is impossible to separate the human being. We don't leave our emotional side at the door when we enter our workplace and just carry in our intellectual or rational side. We come in as a whole. Therefore, our emotions and love, they're within us all the time. That's why we react the way we do. So in terms of acceptance, and the themes that emerge were the reactions and feelings towards the norm, the benefits, including the benefits to the company and the benefits to the employees. In terms of implementation, the themes were leading by example, definition, education and training program, managing risks and challenges of having such norm, and the sustainability of the norm. And I already discussed the last one, the whole self. It's really impossible to divide who we are and only bring one side of us. So in terms of these categories, I'm going to go a little bit further into the acceptance of the norm of love, in which 100% of the participants said that love is part of organizations. 77% said that love is essential for healthy work, relationship, and organizational growth. 55% shared that they linked the norm of love to their own individual values. And 55% also said that love actually impacts all aspects of our life. So in terms of acceptance, the group was very receptive, and I'll just mention this while presenting to them the orientation to see if anybody would be interested in participating, and participation was voluntary. They were very skeptical in the beginning because many of them shared, we've never thought of love belonging in the workplace. What do you mean? And by the end of my orientation, which actually turned into a conversation more than anything, they were very intrigued, they were very curious, and some of them even said, you know, I never think about this, but I totally see. I totally see how if we bring the best of ourselves to the business world, to our workplace, to the organizations where we volunteer, then there is a noticeable difference in the way others interact with us. So they were very receptive, and particularly the ones, obviously, that participated. There was a group out of the, I mentioned it was 24 that participated in the orientation. 6 of them had a very negative reaction, and it was really, for me, interesting, and it was really, I really appreciated having both reactions in my orientation. I was expecting more of the negative. I was surprised about how many accepted the idea with such positivism. But the people who didn't participate in the interviews, their body language was closed. They left immediately after the meeting, when the interview the orientation, I'm sorry, concluded. They were all the time like shaking their heads. So it was really interesting and in a way fun for me to see the difference of the reactions. So going further into acceptance of the norm, in order to accept the norm, people need to see the value in it, right? And these were the benefits that came from the group. This is literally what the participants shared. So what are the benefits to the company? It motivates employees to take ownership of their roles by leading to efficiency, productivity, and commitment, right? And Dr. Chaco Jose, before I began presenting, he mentioned something about in economics, we're looking about profit and the end result. But what we have seemed to forget is that the way we are with each other can have a greater impact to that end result and to profit because people are engaged, people are excited to come to work, and people are willing to take on more ownership of what they do and more responsibility. Another benefit that was shared was it enhances the company culture by creating an ideal work environment. It boosts the quality of service standards. This particular organization, it's known in the industry as having a very high level, very high standards of service. So by boosting the quality of their service standards, they sustain the excellent market recognition that they already have. The norm of love as the driver of business strategy. What was discussed that if we integrate love into the business strategy, then we move to management by values as the strategic model for the organization. We're not managing by objectives, we're not managing by goals, we're managing by what really represents the organization and its members. And in this particular organization as well, it validates the founder values. When the founder of this company started the business, he wanted to transform the business world by creating an environment where everybody would feel cared, not only the employees, but the clients as well. So caring became an expression of love, and it is a value that has permeated throughout the 25 years now of existence. So what are the benefits to the employees? Well, it increases positive behaviors like respect, caring, kindness, authenticity, vulnerability, returning the favor in kind. It improves communication in the way that it's curious, everybody listens, it's getting to know my people, it's having clear expectations, well-defined policies and rules, managing difficult conversations and situations with clarity, and having communication that is dignified and respectful. It generates positive team mindset. When we get to work in an environment like this, it takes us to a place of trusting each other. Therefore, teamwork and inclusion become part of that team mindset. And it encourages to lead by example. Again, the group of the participants, they were all directors, managers, and supervisors in this organization. So they said, seeing people as people. I cannot see my people as a number. I cannot see my people as somebody distant. We are in a team. They are my people. Acknowledging the feelings and the efforts of the employees. It's about being human in our daily interactions, and it's encouraging employees' participation. Sometimes in meetings, we know who are the ones that usually stand up and share, who are the ones that come with ideas, others complain, but there's always one or two that they sit in the back, they don't participate, they don't share. So as leaders, they saw that as their responsibility to encourage those to participate and be part of the group. It's about being fair and ethical, and it's not about abusing power. And I just wanted to mention that some of the behaviors that they mentioned here as benefits to the employees, it's part of what was included in the definition of love for the purpose of this study. Again, sorry. Okay. The second category was implementation. So the group was very creative, and I didn't expect this level of detail when I was interviewing them. I asked questions like, well, how would you implement it? What factors would you consider that would affect or not the norm? And overall, this is what the group, and when I mean the group, it's like it was the majority of the participants shared this. First of all, in order to implement this norm, it has to become a cycle. So we start by leading by example. They were all leaders in the organization, and they truly believed that if they behaved in this way, it was going to be a lot easier for their people to understand and to follow. They also acknowledged that the norm of love needed to be very clearly defined. And in this case, it was understood that the definition would probably vary by organizations, right? We're not trying to look for cookie cutter definition, right? We're trying to look for something that it's meaningful and real for each organization. So in this case, defining the norm of love what would require the entire organization to participate. Once this is clearly defined and understood by everybody, they propose an education and training program. They believe that if the company created groups like an ambassadors programs for the norm, where people could encourage each other in each department area would be helpful. By creating some trainings that would really give examples of people of what would the expected behaviors of the norms look like. And also by including this training as part of the onboarding process of new hires. They also share that creating a norm of love would facilitate when hiring, right? It would give a certain level of description of what the company really is interested to bring in as their employees or their team members. It's not just looking at the skills somebody brings, but if the company is creating this culture, they wanted to bring in people that would support the culture as well. Managing risks and challenges came up quickly also during the interview process. People were concerned about labor laws. They were concerned about people resistant to the norm and how to deal with them. But ultimately, what the group came up with was that if we prepare for that, if the organization prepares for that, then it's easier, right? It doesn't take them by surprise. They already have ways in which they can handle different situations. And they truly believe that if the first four steps, right, of this implementation cycle were followed, it would lead to the sustainability, because at that point, all the members of the organization that supported the norm would understand that it was their responsibility to continue the norm, to have the norm live within the organization. When I asked them at some points about what would you do with people who disagree with the norm or people that are uncomfortable with the norm, would you force them? And it was interesting to hear them say, no, they're entitled to have a different idea or opinion. And if the norm is about loving everybody, then we need to be able to accept that and to include them. And that would be factored in the definition of the norm. Their input would be important at that moment, so they felt that even though the company was moving in a direction, the company was creating a space for them that they would feel safe with the norm of love. And finally, Oh, I think I went ahead. No, now I went too far. Here. And the final category was the connection between the norm of love, and the whole self. So 61% of the participants said that love is fundamental to life. 55% said that it is a reinforcement. Implementing a norm of love would be a reinforcement of their personal practice. 61% of them said that love is definitely connected to human nature. And 77% said that love is an individual and an organizational value. So they saw how love, it's completely in a relationship with the whole self, with the individual. Therefore, they bring it. They bring their emotions. They bring their thoughts. They bring their joy, their sorrows, their family life. All of that comes with them when they come into the workplace. So I noticed when talking to them that the way they saw the connection between love and the whole self was similar to Gestalt theory, that sees the whole as more than the sum of its parts. It is possible to focus on one area of the human being and think that the other human areas have no impact whatsoever in one person, but in reality, it's not what happens. So what were the conclusions and the recommendations after I finished my research? So the first conclusion, it's 100% of the participants would welcome and support and model the norm of love. Love is part of the human essence and a fundamental component of one whole being. It's an individual. Love cannot be taken away from the individual. The third conclusion, it is possible to achieve the norm of love. The group was very positive about this, and they were eager. When I was doing the research, some of them would ask me, so when are we implementing it? And I was like, oh, no, we're doing the research, and we'll come back to the organization, and of course we'll try to work to implement that, but it has to be chosen by the organization. I cannot impose the norm of love. The fourth conclusion was the norm of love would be beneficial to the organization and its employees. The fifth conclusion was the norm of love can be sustained. They saw it. They saw the possibility of sustaining the norm. And finally, a thorough implementation strategy, including all the stakeholders, will prepare the organization to face challenges and risks. What were the recommendations that came up? Well, the definition must be clear, understood, and accepted by all the members of the organization. An implementation process that is adaptable and agile, where trial and error is the norm. It's a new way of thinking in an organization, and particularly in the culture where the research was developed, it shows up in many ways in the way of being, but being conscious about love would have them be in a very different place of thinking, right? And having them to maybe stop before they reacted or before they participated. So openness to understand that it was going to be a trial and error process, it's important. The sustainability of the norm, it's everyone's responsibility, and the organization and its members should always remember that love transforms any interaction. We can be arguing, we can be in disagreement, but if we address each other with respect and with humanity, then that changes completely the type of interaction that we're going to have. Future research, as I and I don't think I mentioned it, but originally I wanted to pursue my study to see how it would impact the customers and the community in which this organization lives. And my mentor said, no, 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 no. That is a doctorate dissertation, not a master's. So he helped me focus it only on the organization. But I'll be honest, I'll be thrilled to continue my work and see um, if we can measure how that impacts the clients and the community in which the organization lives. At that point, then all the stakeholders in the organization would be impacted by the norm of love. So first of all, the future research would be to implement the norm in the organization where it was researched. And I'll get into that a little later. But another future research could be to examine the impact of the norm of love in all internal and external stakeholders, to conduct a comparative study based to examine participants' attitudes across cultures. And I mention this because when I was doing the research of the literature, a lot of the studies were from countries like Australia, Argentina, Chile, Peru, Portugal, um, France, the United States, India, and some of the countries in the Arab region. So I was really surprised to see the diversity, right? And that also supported that love it is an universal value. We are all looking for it one way or another. And finally, another idea for future research was to expand the present study to develop a model for defining, implementing, and sustaining a norm of love. And I say a model because we cannot really create something written in stone. It's a model, but it has to be able to it has to be flexible. It has to be agile because each organization has its own culture. Each organization has their own values. So the norm of love can emerge depending on what the culture and the values of the organization are. So if we were to implement this in different organizations, it would probably look slightly different, understanding that the definition of love, it's a list of behaviors where compassion, kindness, respect, vulnerability, curiosity, respect, tolerance are part of those behaviors, but each organization would give the norm of love its own flavor. What are contributions? And I am sorry I continue talking and I didn't present this. I'll make this available if anybody would like to have a copy of the presentation. So what are the contributions that I saw I could make to the field of organization development, which is the field where I was doing my master's degree? First of all, it's an acknowledgement that love can be the driving force behind any intervention. Second, if employees are open to accept and live by the norm of love, their openness provides a way for organization development practitioners to approach interventions and model what is possible. So as organization development practitioners, we can embody love in our interactions. The study serves as evidence that can be used to advocate for the importance and value of work-related loving interactions and environments. And a defined norm of love, if implemented into one's practice, would provide a shared language between organization development practitioners and their clients. Love is universal, therefore it creates a common ground to serve. So this is, in a nutshell, these are the highlights of my research. But before I finish, my own conclusion, my reflection after I finished this study. I love quotes. I don't know you have noticed I use a lot of quotes. And the reason I love quotes is it's easy for me to remind them. And they give me, for me, they work as a practical way to learn something and include it in my daily life. So to finish off my research and my study, I found this quote that for me is very inspirational, and it's again by Dr. Leo Buscaglia, and it says, if one wishes to know love, one must live love in action. Thoughts, readings, and discourse on love are only of value are of value only as they present questions to be asked upon. So in other ways, I can talk about love, but if I don't include it in my daily life, if I don't manifest it with the way I treat others, it's in vain, right? So during this process, curiosity was my constant companion, from the formulation of the research questions to the study presentation given to the potential subjects, to performing the interviews, and finally to analyzing the data. Love is not a traditional subject matter for organization research, yet it is considered a universal force and essence of humanity. Love plays a central role in our lives, but does not seem to show up as an essential component to the success of any business or organization. This paradox fueled my curiosity for this study, why something we claim to be so important can be ignored in certain aspects of our life, like the workplace. If it shows up somehow, why it is not addressed as love? Instead, it is called kindness, caring, compassion. My goal was to explore the concept while calling it by its name, love. If I call it, it exists, right? I chose to address the elephant in the room, provoke acknowledgement of the concept, create curiosity about why is it treated as a taboo, and introduce an alternate perspective of how life in the workplace could feel. Love is a value and a verb, and I decided to be vulnerable and act upon my beliefs when I approached my research. I have to admit, the journey of doing this research was not what I thought. I chose to explore a universal concept that represents who I am, a concept that is difficult and complex to prove because it is simple and is very subjective. My experience has been that usually the most simple and basic notions go unnoticed because of the complexity in understanding and implementing them. Love is an excellent example of this because it has been taken for granted in the business world. My process was not purely academic. Instead, I used tools to explore and reveal a deep personal belief. The study was really about finding ways that I could contribute to an organization by showing my core and validating love's importance in every aspect of life. It is a way for me to explore how to introduce love to my organization development practice. The journey to complete my study reinforced the universal power of love. My research validated my desire to advocate for for love to be part of all human interactions, to be an agent of change, courageous to talk about love, the elephant in the room, and be an organization development practitioner ready to serve the world with love. So to finish off, I learned throughout my master's degree journey that between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And this is a quote by Viktor Frankl. Thus, I choose to serve with love. Love is what fills up that space for me. And I leave you then with the words of David Wilkerson. Love is not only something you feel, it is something you do. Therefore, I choose love as my companion when walking alongside everyone in this journey of life. I invite you to include love in all aspects of your life, including your workplace. And to finalize, and I'll be done at this point, I go back to that quote by Martin Luther King. Power without love is reckless and abusive, or worse. And love without power is sentimental and anemic, or worse. We can see both of these degenerative forms in ourselves. Choosing either power or love is always a mistake. How then can we exercise power and love together? So, throughout this research, I wanted to find an answer for this question. And my answer, right? It's mine. I for anybody else it would be a different answer, but for me, what I take away is that if we choose love first, we fuel and guide our power with love. Therefore, love becomes that power. Then power will not be reckless and abusive, and love will not be sentimental and anemic. Thank you very much. I hope that you are inspired to include love in your workplace, in organizations, and in every aspect of your life. Thank you very much. I will stop
Thank you.
sharing my
Thank you,
screen.
Vanchi.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much. Sure, sir. Do you have
Uh,
to say something,
yeah, Krishnagiri, you
Chakra
can
sir?
continue. Yeah, Krishnagiri, you can proceed with the
Oh,
questions.
okay.
okay, thank you so much, Ms. Bukati, for that remarkable session. Indeed, love as an organization norm is a paradigm shift in management, how management is conceived and perceived. Now we move on to the
Mm,
Q&A session. Participants,
sure.
please type in your queries in the GoToMeet chat box and I'll be reading out the questions. So far, we have few questions. I'll be reading out to you. Ma'am, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
You mentioned about the concept of love as an elephant in the room, meaning it's present everywhere, but not identified or utilized. How can individuals do identify love in their organization?
I didn't hear the second part of the questions. Let me
Is the question?
see if how can
The
individuals,
question.
sorry,
How can individuals identify love in the organization?
how can they identify? Again, this was a study made in an organization. So the way they believe love could be represented was by the behaviors mentioned in the definition of love, like talking to others with kindness, with compassion, understanding everybody is a human being, and when people walk through the door, they're coming with their lives. Their personal issues don't go away when they walk through the door. Their family concerns don't go away while they're working. So if we keep that in mind, we can approach others with compassion, with kindness. We can see the other as human, and that leads us to behave in ways that are kind, that are respectful, that come with curiosity when we interact with others. Because somebody's acting in a particular way, it doesn't mean um, anything unless we ask them, right? We need to find out why. And if we don't feel comfortable finding out why, then judging them would be very unfair to them. So if we come with compassion, then we can bring love into the environment. We can bring love into our workplace if we act with kindness, with respect, inclusion, right? Including everybody, that it's important to be included. I believe those are the ways in which we can bring love into the work environment, and this is part of what the participants shared as well.
Thank you, Ms. Murthy. Can we have another question? The question is, as a consultant, can you share an incident where introduction of love as a corporate policy made positive changes in the organization? Some personal examples.
Personal examples, I would say I have one in the making. I'm working at the organization that where I did the study. I was hired as an organization development consultant to manage a merger of an acquisition. The company acquired another company, and I'm pretty much leading the process of integrating both organizations. This happened right after I finished my study, and the organization really wanted me to start working with the love norm in the organization, start guiding them through that process. But that took a little bit of a second priority because of this acquisition. So what I have done is, I'm not talking about love necessarily, but I'm behaving how I believe we should behave. And one of the articles I read talked about emotional contagion, and what it meant was that when we behave in a particular way, eventually others within the same group will behave similarly. So it's not taught, it's not expressed, it's obviously implicit, right? But people start all behaving in that particular way. So for example, earlier today, I had a meeting with one of the groups in the organization, and they had met separately before the meeting with me, and it was really interesting for them to say, wow, what a difference it is to really sit down and talk to each other, because we then understand what everybody needs. And that's not something they were used to. They were used to making decisions with what they believed was going to be beneficial for their unit of work or their department. But they were not used to having the conversations with other areas that would be or that would impact, right, their area before making the decisions. So now they're working doing that, and they were really surprised about how well they had been able to communicate, that now they understand. They were sharing, wow, we don't have to argue anymore about this particular issue because we understand it, we get it. So even though that's not an example per se of talking about love and enacting love, it is an example of actually enacting love towards others. It's about being curious enough to understand where the other comes from and the need of the other, and finding a way that we can meet in the middle and work together. That would be an example of the practice. The company is still interested in implementing the norm once everything settles a little bit with all the transition. But I'll give a couple of samples of other companies. Haven't worked for them, but for example, there is an airline, Southwest Airlines, that they include love in their values and in their mission statement. And actually their ticker, they're in the NASDAQ, right, in the stock exchange, is LUV, love. So everything I have read and people that I know that have worked as employees of Southwest, it is really for them a great place to work. That would be one example. I believe it was Zappos that started as a company that they sold shoes, right? They included happiness and caring in their values. And for a long time, that permeated throughout the employees, and they showed up in the way they treated customers, and even their customer service agents were an example of that. I hope this answered your question.
Yes, yes, you have beautifully answered. We have another question. Is there an inverse relationship between love and the corporate
I'm
policy of
sorry,
maximizing profit?
there's background noise and
Participants, please mute the mic. Some of the participants have
One
not
moment,
muted their
somebody
mic.
is making a noise. Let me find out that person.
So it's Helene, Helene.
is it in the chat? Maybe you can.
Thank you, sir. Can you see someone named Helene? Heleni. We have two people talking, Sandra, KV, and Helene. Yes, I think it's all right. Sorry for the disturbance.
No,
Can we
don't.
take the next question?
Yes, could you repeat it
The
again?
question is there an inverse relationship between love and the corporate policy of profit maximization?
I am sorry.
Is there an inverse relationship between love and the corporate policy of profit maximization?
in this particular organization that I work with, or in general? There was still a little bit of background noise, so
In general, in general. In general, ma'am, in general.
Yeah, yeah. I
It's
think
a
she
general
asked, is
question.
there a? Yeah, I think she asked, is there an inverse relationship between the policy of love and profits? If you implement love as a corporate policy, will it reduce profits?
if it will reduce profits, that is
Yeah,
the question.
yeah.
I don't believe
If
it
you
will.
yeah, if
I
you implement love, if you incorporate love along with your corporate policy, will it reduce profits?
No, it has been not necessarily love, but it has been proven, right, that when people work in an environment that they feel respected, that they feel that they can be authentic, that they feel valued, that they find meaning in what they do and meaning in the organization that they belong to, they tend to go beyond the expectations that the organization has for them. Therefore, it impacts profit in a positive way, right? People are engaged, people are more creative, people are willing to go the extra mile. So that impacts in a positive way regarding profit. I have some of those studies, and if anybody would be interested, I can provide them to you, Dr. Chaco, Jose, and you can pass them along. But no, it is believed that no, if love is implemented, if humanity is implemented, integrated in organizations, it will be it will positively impact profit.
Thank you, Ms. Bhagati. I think we'll have one last question. It is from Daisy PK. If the boss of an organization blindly love his employees, it may lead to tragedy of Julius Caesar as Brutus rose against Caesar. On the other hand, if an employee trusts his or her boss deeply, sometimes it may lead to the situation of exploitation of labor, as pointed out by Karl Marx. So the question is, how can we solve this type of love-based risk associated with corporate life? I think the question is about striking a balance in through the concept of love in organizational norm.
Yes, and I can see this is something that was presented by some of the people I interviewed and some of my peers. We have an expression. I am Puerto Rican, and we have an expression in my island that in Latin America it really defines if a person uses that expression, everybody knows they're from Puerto Rico. And the expression is ay bendito. What does that mean? It means, oh, poor little thing. Means that we feel pity, or we feel that the person cannot handle a particular situation, so we're going to give them a break. That's what the ay bendito means. And in many ways, while I was going through this interview process, people said, well, I don't want it to become an ay bendito. I don't want people to abuse the norm, because we're going to be kind, therefore they're going to manipulate it in ways that then we have to be kind to them. So the concern is there. So going back to the question, to create that balance, if the group, right, that the norm is not imposed, the norm is accepted and adopted by the group. The norm, the definition of the norm is created by the group, and again accepted by the group. So when people participate, when human beings, we participate in creating something, there's a level of ownership toward that creation that everybody has. And there's a level of willingness to protect what we created as a group, and to take care of it and to sustain it. So because it's not imposed, the balance happens because everybody is at the same level. Everybody is together working for this. And if somebody were to manipulate the norm or were to take advantage of the norm, it would stand out and the group would see it. Again, a norm is a representation of what matters, what is important to us. And in this case, it's to bring love into the organization, to create an environment where we can trust each other, we can respect each other, we can be kind, have compassion, understanding, accept the differences, right? That's acceptance, means that we accept everybody for who they are and what they are. So if we operate coming from that, it becomes our way of being eventually. So if somebody were to try to take advantage of it, it would stand out and the group would notice. The same way we notice in our society, right? When people behave differently to what we are used to what it's considered acceptable in the community where we live, when somebody behaves contrary to that, it stands out and the group doesn't support it. So it would be similar here in an organization. Is that the question? Did I answer the question?
Yes, I'm sure. Thank you so much. So I think with that, we come to the end of Q&A session. Now I invite Dr. Ms. Geeta from St. Joseph.
Krishnagiri, there is one
Yes,
more
sir.
question. There is one more question. I'll read out. The question is.
Okay, sure, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. If the question is, if the boss of an organization blindly love his employees,
So I've already read that question.
You have already read that question?
That was the question yes. That was the question she answered last.
Oh.
Okay, sorry. You can continue.
Maybe I misunderstood the question.
Yeah, fine. You can continue, Krishnagiri. You can continue.
Okay.
Do you have anything extra to add in that, Ms. Rogeti?
So what I guess that I really didn't understand, if a boss in an organization, it's active right? Based on the norm of love, how to create balance among employees. Is that exactly what the question was?
Yes, exactly. That was the question.
Um, that is tricky, right? Because love is subjective. But when we're creating a norm, we're creating an acceptable set of behaviors for the group. So as part of that norm, what would it entail? And in this particular case, the group came up with some of this. They shared that when the norm is defined, the behaviors are established, and that would include things like having constant, not constant, but periodical um, conversations, one-on-one conversations with employees, finding out with employees what's working, what's not. How can I help you as a boss, right? How can I help you if you notice your people are not necessarily performing how they should? Maybe look at, do we need to develop this particular employee more or not? So that way, that creates a certain balance because it is being done with everybody. Um, that's, I hope that answered. And I think I'm seeing one of the questions here, and I'm wondering if it's the same. I found a question says, if the boss of organization blindly loves his employees, it may lead to the tragedy of Julius Caesar, as Brutus rose against Caesar. On the other hand, if an employee trusts his or her boss deeply, sometimes it may lead to the situation of exploitation of labor, as pointed out by Karl Marx. My question is that how can we solve this type of love-based risks associated in the corporate life? Now I really fully get the question. Sorry about that. Um, I think exploitation happens when we are all not on the same level. We are not working together. Exploitation happens when there's no teamwork, when we believe our leaders and our managers, supervisors are above us in an environment where love is the driving force. Everybody's playing in the same level. The organizational, the hierarchical level of bosses and supervisors, it's hierarchical. It just defines the type of job that person will do. But in terms of implementing a norm of love, what it is creating is an environment where everybody is human. So exploitation couldn't be a product of a norm of love. The organization, if they truly believe and supported and took care of the norm, the organization wouldn't get to that point. Maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm a dreamer, maybe I'm thinking the best of humanity, but that's what I choose to believe. I don't choose to put on um, rosy eyeglasses to see the world different than what it is. I see the world how it is, but I choose to see the beauty in the world, not the negativity. I if if I focused on what it's negative, life would be painful. So I choose to believe in the beauty of humanity, in the essence, the beauty of our essence. And that creates an environment for me where Julius Caesar and Brutus wouldn't happen and exploitation wouldn't happen because we're treating each other with the same level of respect. And that is what the norm calls for, to see everybody for what they are as human beings, nothing better, nothing less, and to treat everybody with respect and with kindness and with acceptance of the other. Hopefully now I I answered.
Very well answered, Max. Very well answered. A profound answer it was. So thank you so much, Miss Bogati. With that, I'm sorry for the unanswered questions in the comment boxes. With that, we come to the end of Q&A session. Now I invite Dr. Ms. Geeta from St. Joseph College Autonomous Irinalakuda to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Krishna Gidi. Good morning, all of you. Once a great man, William Arthur, whispered, "Feeling gratitude and not expressing it is like a wrapping a present and not giving it." It's a matter of pride for me that I got a chance to deliver vote of thanks for this event. Today, I take this opportunity on behalf of the Department of Economics to put all my gratitude into words. I profound our deep sense of gratitude to our enthusiastic principals, Dr. Sister Asha Teres of St. Joseph College, Irinalakuda, and Dr. Sister Reena Itiachen of Sacred Heart College, Chalakudi, for their support and effort to make this event possible. I would also like to extend my special thanks to our loving vice principals, management, and the entire sisters of for their sincere prayers for the successful conduction of this event. Love is my choice. It is the way I decide to face life, is the sentence she gave in her research project. While hearing her lecture, I feel it is true. Yes, I take this golden opportunity to thank our esteemed chief guest of this event, Vanji M. Bogatti. Ma'am, you have honored this event with your inspiring speech. We will cultivate the information you gave us in the real life. Thank you, ma'am. I profound our deep sense of gratitude to our commendable convener of this two-day international conference, Dr. Chaco Jose P., Head, Department of Economics, Sacred Heart College, Chalakudi, who was the originator and chair of this event. We heartily thank you for putting efforts to organize this conference, sir. Your mindfulness, inventiveness, and careful arranging guaranteed that we had an effective day. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. I'm happy to express my earnest thanks to our enduring ma'am, Ms. JCPK, Head, Department of Economics, St. Joseph College, Autonomous, Irinalakuda, who is also a convener of this conference. Ma'am, we are so thankful for this fruitful event which you brought to our table today. Thank you, ma'am. We couldn't have pulled this off without you. I take this occurrence to thank the webinar coordinators and executive members from both the colleges for their persistent support and harmonization to organize this webinar in a successful manner. I also like to extend my thanks to Krishna Geeti, our moderator. Thank you, dear, for your extensive contribution. Finally, generous thanks to our students and participants who have turned up in great numbers for making this webinar successful. Once again, I thank you all for your cordial cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta ma'am. So power without love is reckless and abusive or worse. And love without power is sentimental and anemic or worse. We can see both of these degenerative forms in ourselves. Choosing either power or love is always a mistake. Then how can we exercise the power of love, exercise power and love together? Martin Luther King. I think the answer lies with each one of us and how we implemented things presented to us by Miss Bogati. So thank you for joining us in our first session. Our next session will be from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. IST. It will be chaired by Dr. Shirley Jose, IQAC Coordinator and Associate Professor at Sacred Heart College, Chalakudi. And the invited lecture will be from Dr. Jay Kishan Prashar from Zakir Hussain College, New Delhi, on the topic Economics as a Welfare and Science, Holo or Hubristic. So kindly join with us then. I think we'll break for the day. Once again, wish you all a very good day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Vanji, for this talk. That was really wonderful to have this session, and you really effectively communicated what we had in mind when we discussed